do. I'm not even allowed to pee at a restaurant if I don't have a vaccine card, and I'm super pregnant, and life feels like, how could this be the world we're living in? And I'm scrolling through Instagram, and I see this handsome young man speaking at a board, some kind of city board council meeting, and he articulates how ridiculous what's going on is in a way that literally I felt seen for the first time in a long time through this super huge struggle. I'm losing everything. I can't even pee at a restaurant. Even my own brother's restaurant, I had to call him to get permission to go pee because they wouldn't let me in the door. Just craziness, right? He was so articulate, Alec Zeck, and young and inspired, and I thought, I gotta meet this guy, like they're on the same page. And totally unrelated to that, there's this kid that's been calling me and calling me and calling me to start some vegetable box program with him, and he's gonna start the Uber Eats of vegetable boxes, and I need to go to this meeting. I tell a kid, like, you can come by the restaurant and talk to me. I told him, I can't know so many times. So he shows up with his spreadsheets and everything. And I say, okay, we can try your app. We'll put our vegetable boxes on your app. And a couple weeks later, he's trying to impress me. And he's like, I'm gonna bring these guys to your farm. And he's trying to impress these guys too, right? And so he brings these guys to the Regenerative farm so they can be impressed. And he brings these guys to me so that I can be impressed. And what's so interesting is him and Ben Tapper, who was one of the disinformation dozen, and they were just on the high wire this week and crushed it together. But I had just given Ben Tapper $1,500 for raising money for the film he was doing on Venmo, and then Venmo stole all his money because they didn't want him to make an anti-vax film. And they showed up, and I was like, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And he was like, are you Molly Englehart? You gave me the biggest donation of anybody on Venmo. And me and Ben and Alec became instant friends, and we started creating events together. And we've gone through so many changes, so many ups and so many downs, but we have been steady in that there is a pathway forward for humanity. And it's not to get into the fear. It's to create that pathway, to be the people that are moving forward. And he has an awesome platform called The Way Forward, which is obviously what we all need is the way forward. So I want to introduce Alex, my dear friend who has been a stand for freedom for so long, and I am so grateful to say 5 years later that he is one of my best friends and my business partner and an inspiration ongoing. And we are lucky to have him and lucky to get to listen to him tonight. Let's welcome Alec Zeck.
Okay. Thank you all so much for being here. I always love when I get to speak to new faces. Love being at Sovereignty Ranch. It's probably one of my favorite places in the world, if not my favorite place in the world. Just a little bit about me. I graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point, majored in systems engineering, spent 5 years in the Army, did my minimum fun fly. When people thank me for my service, it's a little weird for me because I primarily played a sport while I was in the Army. So, and most people are like, what is that sport? But that's another funny part. So if you don't know what team handball is, it is an Olympic sport that we haven't qualified for since 1996. So, okay. Let's see if I can get my clicker work. Okay, because I have a third baby and he was not featured in that picture, this is a picture of my kids yesterday. My 8-year-old son Grayson, 5-year-old daughter Charlie, and then my newborn baby, 11-month-old Shai, which means gift in Hebrew. So. Okay, who feels like this is an accurate picture of the world right now? Honestly, raise your hand if that's sweet. Okay. Some of you are like, no, dude, I'm showing here something, right? That's the whole point, is how much of that is actually this. How much of that may replace that, especially because there's not, I'm not trying to age you all, but maybe you don't use your phone as much, maybe it's more TV, or maybe you're like a millennial that you always complain about you're on your phone too much too. Doom scrolling, seeing this is your world right now. And how much of it is actually like this? When we put that device down, when we turn off the TV, when we turn off the radio, turn off, yeah, obviously everyone knows the mainstream media at this point, but how much of the alternative media is conditioning you into perpetual fear, into doom, into the world's falling apart, and if we just put our phones down and look around us, everything's pretty beautiful in most cases, right? And even if it's not, we're going to discuss what it might take to change the world if your world is actually like that. And so, for a lot of us, it goes from this to where we're perpetually thinking, ruminating on the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab. Everyone in here knows the name Klaus Schwab. What Klaus Schwab is doing, what the government is doing, what's happening on the border, what's happening in Iran. All these things, we're just constantly ruminating on them, right? For many of us at this point. And I think for many of us, we feel like we have to, quote unquote, have to consume this information, because if we don't, we're not going to be aware of what's going on in the world. We're afraid if we're not aware of what's going on in the world, then that world will become our world. So we spend a crazy amount of time for many of us sharing information with our family and friends, posting on Facebook, like trying to warn people of what's coming, perpetually, right? Is this resonating so far? Is this making sense? Okay, good. So what can we actually do to prevent that world from becoming our world? How do you, as individuals, really change the world? Okay, some context. This may seem unrelated, but it all ties in. So, who knew that you are 2/3 water by 99% water molecular? Okay, so who has heard of the fourth phase of water? You're not allowed to raise your hand. You've heard it. You know what? Actually, I gotta pause and do something real quick. It is Jennifer's birthday today, so we're gonna say happy birthday to her. Jennifer, could you stand up for me real quick? You didn't even know that I knew his name, did you? Wow. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. How did this guy even know my name? Well, you raised your hand about the fourth phase of water. Okay, so the fourth phase of water, just some context, this is Dr. Gerald Pollack, and I'm going to just touch on this briefly because it relates to what we're talking about today. So, water, when it is exposed to hydrophilic surfaces just means a water-loving surface, will form this phase of water that's not fully liquid, not fully solid, but almost like it becomes H3O2 rather than H2O. And the reason that context is important is because our body is comprised of hydrophilic surfaces. Hydrophilic surfaces, water-loving surfaces, are ubiquitous in our body, okay? So the unique properties about this type of water specifically, other than it becoming a gel, is that typically water is neutral in charge, but this type of water, the area next to the hydrophilic surface forms a high negative charge. When you hear negative charge, just think of potential energy, okay? And then it pushes anything that is positively charged, any particles, toxins, positively charged particles, to the perimeter. And when you have charge separation like this, you have a boundary, okay? And again, hydrophilic surfaces are ubiquitous in the body. We're 2/3 water by weight, 99% water molecularly. And they've actually shown in Dr. Pollack's lab that if you expose this type of water to infrared light, that area is negative charge, and negative charge being area of potential energy, expands when it's exposed to infrared light, okay? And they've also done some pretty interesting experiments, we'll skip that one, where they've taken small LEDs and light bulbs and hooked up one of the electrodes to the area of positive charge, another electrode to the area of negative charge, and actually shown that this is an actual energy production mechanism, okay? So, what might that look like on a cellular level? So you have your cell membrane, which itself is a hydrophilic surface, and next to the cell membrane, you have that area of negative charge that forms. And it pushes anything that's positively charged to the center, and cells will undergo some sort of like a cellular turnover process, push out that area of positive charge through various cellular mechanisms. But what helps maintain a negative charge inside our bodies? Again, meaning what helps us have potential energy to do work inside of our bodies. Infrared light, that has been demonstrated by Dr. Brown. Grounding, when you put your bare feet on the earth, I know that may seem woo to some people, but you're actually receiving negative charge from the earth. Early in the morning, late at night, you receive a lot of infrared light from the sun. During the middle of the day, you're receiving a lot of UV light, which has been shown to excite or supercharge the area of negative charge. And you could say, breathing people. Dr. actually put out a really interesting paper about a year and a half ago that I don't remember which medical journal was published in, but it was a peer-reviewed paper talking about how when we breathe, it's less about taking oxygen and more about oxygen being a good donor for negative charge. So it's actually electrifying our bodies when we breathe in properly. And that's why when we go out in nature and breathe, we just feel so much better, because there's an abundance of negative charge in nature, where in most cases in our cities and our homes, we have an abundance of artificial light. We have an abundance of we have an abundance of things that help or that hurt our body's ability to build water, which is what it's called, exclusion zone water. So the question I'd like to ask is, how many of us are doing these things? Maybe you weren't aware of some of these things before, but how many of us are doing these things that we need to be doing that are fully in our control on a daily basis to maintain optimal health? How many of us can honestly say that? I know I struggle with it sometimes. How many of us are contemplating, damn it, Jeff Bezos, whoever it is? It's like, no. Let's check in. Am I doing everything that is in my control that I should be doing on a day-to-day basis to maintain optimal health? How many of you honestly say that? I know I struggle with it sometimes. So there's a separate category of things that I'd like to get into. I think most of us can recognize that our beliefs, thoughts, and feelings inform and color our words and actions in the world. You're part of Brownstone Institute. You're here at this ranch. You're ostensibly like-minded health. So you understand the importance of dissolving these conditioned beliefs and systems that we've been taught to adopt, that we've been conditioned over time to accept, right? But I actually want to propose that our beliefs, thoughts, and feelings not only color and inform our words and actions, our beliefs, thoughts, and feelings might actually be causal vectors with respect to our own physiology. And I'll get into even more concepts in a little bit. But beliefs, thoughts, and feelings might actually be causal vectors with respect to the nature of this reality that we are experiencing right now. Okay, so who's heard of the placebo effect? The placebo effect. Okay, so the effect is just the inverse. It's when you receive what is fundamentally a substance and you think, you expect a negative response. Okay? So here's an example, and there's plenty of published papers on the effect. So in this paper, stress dramatically slows wound healing. Oral wounds were given to students during both exam week and vacation. During exams, you feel 40% slower, and levels of interleukin-1, a key immune healing molecule, dropped by 2/3. This study shows how mental stress and belief in pressure and threat can actively impair the immune system recovery. So I think that's pretty common knowledge at this point, that stress impacts our body's ability to heal. And I think, again, it goes even beyond that. So in this one, participants were told they expect either pain relief, placebo, or increased pain from what was a saline injection. Those expecting more pain experienced a measurable cortisol spike. So your body actually producing biochemistry related to the belief that you are receiving a substance that is producing harm, when really you're receiving a substance that is not harmful at all. despite receiving them harmful. This expectation of pain causes stress hormone response, essentially manufacturing the harm from belief alone. This one, in a controlled study, forced asthmatics into what they were told was an allergen or irritant. In reality, it was harmless nebulized saline. Nearly half of the asthmatics developed measurable airway constriction, and 12 had full asthma attacks, which were all reversed when they were told they were receiving a medicine, which was, again, just nebulized saline. None of the controls reacted, belief alone triggered and then relieved the attacks. This one, in this clinic, and by the way, this is the only one which is not a peer-reviewed study, just for those who care about that. I don't particularly care. In this clinical trial by the British Cancer Group, 411 cancer patients were divided into groups, including one who received only placebo saline injections. Patients were warned about typical chemotherapy side effects like loss and vomiting. Despite receiving no actual chemotherapy, over 30% of the placebo group lost their hair and experienced vomiting. You see what I'm getting at with this, with our beliefs, thoughts, and feelings that we're carrying on a daily basis? So, what beliefs, thoughts, and feelings are you carrying each day, and how is that your ability to be coherent? Have you ever considered that? That not only is it informing your words and actions in the world, but it might be an actual causal vector with respect to your own physiology. A common belief that a lot of us carry these days is I'm unworthy of love. Is that then creating the conditions in your body that you're not experiencing love? Okay, luckily, again, there's an inverse to that, which is the placebo effect. So in this creative experiment, participants received identical stimulants but were misled about how much time had passed since the injury. When participants believed that more time had elapsed, their wounds healed significantly faster, even though the actual time was the same for everyone. This showed that the belief about time alone had the power to directly accelerate biological healing. This one, patients were given a placebo that they were told was a powerful pain reliever. They reported genuine pain relief. But when the drug that blocks opioid receptors was administered, the pain relief, this clearly indicated that placebo belief had triggered the body's own release of endorphins, and the effect was biochemically real. Again, based on belief alone, the body producing real biochemistry related to the idea that they were receiving something that was to produce that biochemistry. But it was just, this one is both really incredible and also very sad. Mr. Wright, the terminal cancer patient, was given a placebo he believed to be a bear drug. His tumors dramatically. When he later learned that treatment was ineffective, the tumors returned. But when given another placebo, this time described as a quote, his tumors disappeared again. When he finally discovered the truth, he declined rapidly and passed. This case demonstrated just how quote, belief can be even, okay. This was also, I'm just going to skip over these because we can read these forever. I think you guys are getting the point. This one subset of the work at a hotel were told that their actions on a daily basis qualified based on the guidelines as legitimate, like working out essentially, and another subset was not told anything. And those who were told that what they were doing qualified as actual physical exercise improved across all health metrics relative to the group that was not told that, despite both groups doing the exact same things. There's other ones where, I think this is in one of Dr. Joe's books, if I remember correctly, a group of elderly people in an elderly home were told to believe that they were a younger version of themselves and act on a daily basis as much as they could as if they were younger versions of themselves. And I don't think exactly how much time had elapsed. By the end of the study, those who were on a daily basis acting, believing, and behaving as if they were their younger selves actually improved across a variety of health metrics relative to those who were not told them. Okay, so a little bit more context. You guys following me so far? It's very delicious food. I just want to make sure this is all landing. Okay, so who has not heard of data? Who has not heard of these? Raise your hand if you've never heard. Okay, sweet. So who has heard? Okay, cool. Room split. So has expanded upon the work of a guy by the name of Dr. Sarah Mojo. Basically what it does is she takes water in a petri dish and, let's say, sets it over a written word, or sets it over a picture, or sets it next to a song that's playing, or sets it next to her as she's feeling something deeply, or sets it next to her bedside at night and sets the intention for water to learn what she's dreaming about. Or has it placed thousands of miles away. Think of something specific with the intention to project what they're thinking about onto the water that is holding. And then she does this unique freezing method for a certain period of time. And water will reflect back its own artistic interpretation of what it was just exposed to. So here's an example. This is a picture of one of the friends. And she's had water over the top of it, frozen it. Yeah. Yes. Yep. Yeah. Okay, I'll get to this in a minute. She has over, I think, 40,000 documented examples of this now. And for those who are like, well, it's just her doing it, how she not. She teaches this in workshops across the world and on Zoom, where people are doing the exact same freezing technique, getting the exact same results that she gets. Okay? So, photo of the face, she's water condition over the top of it, freezes it. This is what water displays. There's another example from work. Written number 4, you see water in the dish set over the top of it. And the frozen imagery there on the right is water's reflection, what she calls photo water's response when it's frozen. Picture of an actual rather than a picture of it. Water's response frozen. And the pyramid set inside the water. Water, when it's frozen, that's the response. Her son's hand set of water's response. Photo of a vineyard, water's response. Again, she has tens of thousands of examples of this, and she covers a variety of them in her book that she just released within this last year called The Living Language of Water. And what's really incredible is she has documented over 30 what she calls glyphs, which is where if she's, let's say, for example, writes the word gratitude in English, Spanish, or Mandarin, or there's a picture that represents gratitude, or a song that represents gratitude, or she herself is so incredibly grateful, and then she does her freezing method with the water, water will reflect back the 6-pointed leaf. So that is water's symbol, water's language for gratitude. She's done the same for love, for a variety of other words, and she covers that in the language of water. Okay, again, you are 2/3 water by weight, 99% water molecularly. Virtually all life forms are primarily comprised of water, and water permeates all facets. You know, it's really funny when people say, like, joke about, oh, thoughts and prayers, what's your thoughts and prayers? I fundamentally believe prior to work, but especially now, because of work and what I know and what I'll get to here in a minute, that if we pray intently and we are genuine in our prayers, individually and collectively, those prayers will be answered. And if they're not answered in the exact way that we intended, God has something better for us. And that, again, if what she's showing is true, and she's repeated it thousands and thousands of times, and other people have as well, by her work, then water will change its physical orientation based on the thoughts it is exposed to. And water permeates all facets of reality. What might that mean about our ability, individually, more importantly, collectively, to impact the waters of the world, so to speak? And again, what beliefs, thoughts, and feelings about others in the world are you carrying around each day, and what impact is that having not only on you, but possibly reality itself? Like, the world is too divided, it can't be fixed. Agenda 2030 is coming, and we're screwed. Insert anyone is an evil POS. Biden is an evil POS. Insert anyone deserves to die. I hate insert ex lover or family member for what they've done. There aren't enough awake people, so we're done. We're doomed. We are helpless to the agendas. They are more powerful than us. We're just a small minority. What impacts might those beliefs be having on the waters of the world to impact the actual nature of this experience itself? You get what I'm putting down right now? What's crazy is there's actually a strong indication for this in a lot of published peer-reviewed studies. So for example, this one. In 2017, a drug in New Zealand, an antidepressant, had just gone off patent, which means that a bunch of generic drugs were made by other companies based off this previously drug. And one of the generic versions was causing a lot of adverse events. And there are 27 adverse events or adverse responses, side effects being reported to whatever New Zealand's adverse system is. When the mainstream media decided to run a story on the generic antidepressant, for whatever reason, they named 6 of the 27 common symptoms. So again, 27 common symptoms were being experienced across the board according to New Zealand's adverse reporting system. Mainstream media runs a story, broadcasts that story to the masses in New Zealand, sharing only 6 of the 27. What they followed was adverse events reported skyrocketed by 470% only in the 6 symptoms that were named by them. This one's wild. Think about COVID. So this one, a TV show in Portugal, had roughly 42% of the country of Portugal tuned into this TV show. And one particular episode of this TV show, they had an outbreak of a deadly on this TV show. And I think it was across 14 schools the following week at the same exact time had crazy quote-unquote outbreaks where people were reporting symptoms like rashes, dizziness, difficulty, and seizures. And once they figured it out, they get back to these real measurable symptoms that could simultaneously, could not possibly relate to, this is the whole separate conversation, the possibility that there was a viral spread could not have been a possibility at all, because it happened instantaneously across 14 schools all at the same time. After 42% of the country tuned into this show where an outbreak occurred. So another example of what's called illness. Okay, and there are countless examples of these. If you want to read a really interesting book that gets into all the details on this, just come find me afterwards, or I can share it right now. It's called Can You Catch a Cold? And it goes into the various attempts throughout history to demonstrate the idea that people sick people with their bodily fluids. Again, that's a whole separate conversation. I do also have a lot of presentations on that. But what's interesting is at the end of the book, Daniel Royce, the author, covers a variety of studies of what's called illness and mass social contagion, where things happen in mass across the population of people that could not possibly be by quote-unquote viral spread or anything like this. Okay, so I don't think they win because they're more powerful. I think whoever they are win because they've convinced us that we're powerless, while also using our own knowledge against us. And I think self-ownership, we're all loving people here that want to be able to own ourselves and our property, and we don't want the government to infringe upon that. But I think it's more than just owning ourselves, our bodily property. It's owning our beliefs, thoughts, feelings, words, and actions on a day-to-day basis. And taking radical ownership of that. And I think this is what those who wish to control, they want us to be perpetually focused on what they're doing. So that we're not only focused on we might possibly be projecting that into reality, but instead we can be projecting this reality and also taking practical actions ourselves. Of course, the practical actions are important, but I like to cover the stuff that most people don't consider, that your beliefs, thoughts, and feelings have an impact on the nature of this experience itself. So it's important to be aware of what others are consciously and unconsciously co-creating. Speak up and speak out about atrocities that are happening across the world, of course, but don't feed it your thought energy. What I call thought energy is your beliefs and thoughts and feelings when aligned. I think I'm going to get into this later, but I might as well cover it now. Actually, no. So when I hear a phrase that, well, there's not enough people who are awake, or there's more of them than us, there's nothing that we can do to stop the agendas that are happening, I like to share this example. This is also coming from work. Molly's already smiling, she's stoked. Those are your eggs, exactly. Those are your eggs. You know what's funny about this? Okay, so on the left here, yeah, this is from selling. Okay, so in America, we would call this a pasture-raised egg, but in New Zealand, where their agricultural system isn't as corrupt, so when she says free range, she means genuinely free range. So when Veda takes eggs from Molly's old farm in California and cracks them open, which are eggs coming from that are raised as chickens are supposed to be raised, doing what chickens are supposed to be doing, right? Cracks them open, it looks like this here on the left, right? Versus when she takes an egg coming from a chicken that's under 4 months, antibiotics, vaccines, fed natural diet, under perpetual fight or flight, raised under artificial lights and cages, that's what it looks like. You guys see the clear difference? You see it from all the way back there? See the clear difference between the two, right? Okay. So we did an interesting experiment where she took a single pasture-raised egg and surrounded it with 12 caged eggs in this orientation. Okay? And she took one egg from the same batch of pasture-raised eggs, cracked it open, and set it to the side as control, which is what you see, I guess, the white one on the middle. And then from the same batch of caged eggs, that's on the far right. So that's what you see there. On the right side of the screen is what the caged eggs should look like when they're cracked open and it's frozen. In the middle is what you should expect when they're cracked open and it's frozen. So after keeping them in this orientation overnight, where one pasture-raised egg was surrounded by 12 caged eggs, this is what happened. All of the caged eggs improved in their crystallography just by being in proximity to one pasture-raised egg. Here's a close-up of that. You can see the clear difference because this is what it was supposed to have looked like. In the same batch, now all these caged eggs, just by being in proximity to one pasture egg, all. And then she did it again. Now she's saying results again. All of the caged eggs. And it's also taken tap water, which goes through chlorine treatment, stripped of a lot of vital minerals, and then unsealed light and gold plastic and metal piping. And she set it next to spring water, and then frozen. And typically when it freezes spring water, it has this beautiful feathery pattern in it, and tap water basically looks like that figure I showed you. No coherence in its crystallography. But when she sets tap water next to spring water and then freezes both of them, the tap water now looks like spring water in its crystallography just by being in proximity to the spring water. And also the spring water improves its crystallography. Okay. So who is aware of the term the human biofield? Okay. So the human biofield is the electromagnetic field that surrounds the human body. And a dear friend of mine who's spoken at every version of Confluence, she actually named Confluence, is the world's, I would guess you could say, pioneer of the human biofield. And she always finds it funny when people are like, oh, that's woo-woo nonsense. She's like, okay, do you have an electrical current? Yes, well established. Okay. Do things with an electrical current magnetic field? Yes. Okay. So you have an electromagnetic field in your body. Hey, congrats. You just solved it yourself. So you do have an electromagnetic field in your body. In the National Institute of Health is this term. That other civilizations have called it, for example, the people of Peru call it, a lot of the traditions from India they might call it. But that's essentially what we're talking about here. It's the electromagnetic field that surrounds you. And this is the principle of electromagnetism. Strong coherent field, weaker coherent fields. So I think this might be, here we go. I think this might be what's happening here. Is that by being exactly as it's supposed to be, pasture, just by virtue of its existence, is so that can't help but be entrained and come into coherence. And how might that apply to us as human beings? Now, I want to preface what I'm about to get into by saying, what I'm going to cover is transcendental meditation. I want to say something very clearly, though. I'm not saying that you have to practice meditation to be coherent. What this is indicative of, though, that when we align our beliefs, thoughts, and feelings, focus intently on them, pray to God, and in all of this we also take action in the world. Even before we get to the actions, just those beliefs, thoughts, and feelings might have an impact on the nature of this experience, as I've already discussed. Okay. Sorry if you want to take a picture. It's your birthday. I can slow down. Just let me know if you want me to stop. Okay, so in the summer of 1993, I think actually might have been 2003, but might have mistyped on my slide. It was either 2003 or 1993. 4,000 individuals in Washington, D.C. to practice meditation for nearly 2 months with the specific intention to lower crime in Washington, okay? By the end of the trial, violent crime had dropped by 23% compared to projected, despite seasonal trends suggesting it should have increased. And they also accounted for, in their statistical analyses, changes, policy changes, policing changes, historical trends, et cetera, and they could not find a way to account for crime dropping by 23%. And for those who are not familiar with statistical analyses, a p-value of 0.05 or less indicates a strong statistical significance, okay? So with that context, the p-value for this study was 0.0000000002, meaning the odds of relationship between the meditation and the crime lowering chance were nearly zero. Now, I would never say that there is a direct causal link because they did not prove a direct causal link. What they did indicate, rather, is that there is incredibly strong correlation between a group of people meditating with the specific intention to lower crime and then crime actually. And there are countless examples of this, by the way. So this one, same thing in Kansas City. And within 2 years, crime dropped by 30% compared to regions. And the only distinguishing factor during that period was the steady presence of a coherence creating meditation group, and the p-value on this was 0.01. And there's another example where in the first year alone, crime dropped by 13.4%, and over the next 4 years, crime steadily moved up 40% below what projections had anticipated. And I encourage you to go look this up. Just type in the Maharishi effect, that's what it's called. And there are countless studies, and even non-peer-reviewed, just examples of this though. Okay, this is what I was going to cover earlier, but I wanted to save it for now. So, here's a quote from Don Gelt, who's an incredible author. Your mind will play tricks, but the way you feel in your heart, in your guts, is the truth. And so Veda has done some work with water, demonstrating this as well, where if she is feeling one thing, but speaking another thing, trying to get what she's speaking about to imprint upon water, water won't be what she's speaking about. Water what she's feeling. Okay? So when I hear people say like, I hear what you're saying, but I'm just so angry at my dad or my son who's gone, or I'm angry at someone, one of my loved ones, a doctor recommended that they did this treatment and they ended up dying. I'm just so angry right now. You gotta feel that. And I've done so many different, I've taught so many different approaches to healing emotional things. And here's what it all comes down to in my humble. So many of us try to cope away from feeling or distract ourselves from feeling instead of creating the space to feel. Now there's one camp who would take the very David approach of just man up, where you're completely disconnected from your feelings. And there's the other end of the spectrum, the deep spiritual types, where it's like, I'm still feeling, I'm still processing, brother. So I didn't show up to the meeting today for the 5th time in a row because I'm still processing my emotions. There's a place for all of that, but really what it comes down to is I think a lot of people that struggle with chronic anxiety, chronic depression, chronic whatever, when it comes to psychospiritual emotional conditions, I've got in the background of their psyche because they're not allowing themselves to fully feel it. To create the space to fully feel what needs to be felt. And COVID was a gift. That's what you can get to when you feel those feelings of anger. Is anyone here familiar with heart's work? You are on it. You are on it, my friend. I'm so glad I sang happy birthday to you. So work is based on the idea that there are many parts of our, it's a Jungian philosophy. And a simple way to put that is Maybe you have moments in your life where you were victimized, but you want to get out of the victim mentality. You just don't know how to feel that. In order to get out of victim mentality, you have to feel the feelings associated with being a victim and say, no, I'm pissed off right now. I was victimized, so I'm going to feel the feelings of what it feels like to be a victim. And by feeling that deeply, you can then step out of it. And then you can get to, oh, that experience that I experienced where I was a victim, and I'm no longer a victim, was an incredible gift for me because it allowed me to go deeper into myself and form a new belief and thought pattern about myself and my relationship with reality. So, COVID was incredibly traumatic for a lot of people, don't get me wrong, but also it was a gift. I wouldn't be standing here doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for COVID. I know a lot of people can say the same thing. That they've deepened their connection with themselves, with God, with each other, they've found new friends that get it, they've adopted new lifestyle habits and everything like this. The Great Reset is a gift. 2030 is a gift. It's a gift if we recognize it as a catalyst and we're not perpetually focused on it. We're like, we're aware of what's going on, and now I know that they're doing what they're doing ultimately because they know how powerful we are if we reconnect deeply with ourselves, with the land, with each other, and with God, and actualize God's kingdom on earth through us, each and every one of us. That's why we're doing it. By us constantly focusing on, oh my God, it's coming, we're actually helping to perpetuate being like, oh, why are they doing that? Why? And if you ask the people of all reasons that I think they know how powerful we truly are. And they use our own power against us. Okay. My favorite verse in the Bible, by far, including all my presentations. Father, forgive them for they know what they're doing. After he was whipped and tortured, and carried to the cross of Calvary, water was given vinegar, and then was nailed to them during the cross that he carried up. While did I undergone all that, he said, Father, forgive them for not what. How can we come to embody that in our own lives with the various people that we're angry at? Even if it's a loved one who we struggle to forgive. If we can really sit and reflect on, maybe there's a broken child inside of them. Maybe they've forgotten who they truly are. And by me deeply forgiving them, which requires that you go through all of those emotions, so that I actually feel it, I can help bring them into coherence as well. I can act as that. So forgive yourself, forgive others, love yourself, and love others. And remember who you truly are. Who you truly are. You are. Is that child that was playful and loving deep inside of you. And that's who I think the overwhelming majority of us are. Maybe there's some drunk people walking around. I tend not to think about that. I don't really care. The point is, the people who are doing very, very horrible, wicked things, even with the Epstein files coming out, I guarantee they were exposed to the same things when they were little. I'm not saying that we need to move into like radical forgiveness and just be like, oh, there shouldn't be any prosecutions or anything like this. That's not what I'm saying. But can we recognize that what perpetuates the cycle is continuing to perpetuate not only the actions and words, but the belief thoughts and feelings about, oh, we need to get back at them, we need revenge. They need to be held accountable. We need to burn all of them down. Instead of coming to coherence and recognize that those are hurt people, disturbing people, and breaks the cycle by no longer radical ownership of our actions on a daily basis. Okay. I'll leave you with this. When we cultivate coherence, take ownership of our beliefs, thoughts, feelings, and actions, and remember who we are, the waters of our bodies become more coherent, and not the waters of the world. We help the world become more coherent, literally, just by virtue of our existence. And that's how we change the world.